Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to beautiful downtown Grand Forks. This is Grand Forks City Council's Committee of the Whole from Monday, June 14th. Under item 1, call to order, 1.1, welcome and roll call.
Weigel. Dockler. Here. Weber. Mock. Kavami.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
Veen.
Here.
We have a quorum.
I think, Mr. Weigel is on. He just wasn't able to.
I'm here.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Weigel. Okay, under item 2, discussion items, item 2.1. Approval of change of ownership for Grand Forks Taxi from Don Cash to J&N Operations. Ms. Storstad, good evening.
Yes, thank you. President Sandy, members of the committee. Your first item in front of you tonight is regarding a change in ownership of Grand Forks Taxi. City Council approval is required for new taxi companies or changes in ownership of an existing taxi company. As stated in your staff report, the Finance Department, we do process licenses for taxi vehicles and drivers. Vehicles require annual inspection. Drivers are subject to background check. Also, the company is required to submit copy of certificate of liability insurance. Don Cash has operated Grand Forks Taxi since 2009, and he has sold his business now to J&N Operations. The new owners will continue to operate under the same name, Grand Forks Taxi, and Nick Kohler has submitted his request to City Council for approval of this ownership change. The application is attached. Your approval is subject to final review and approval of city departments, and the submission of the liability certificate and payment of fees. We would recommend you move this forward to City Council for approval, of course, subject to approval of the city departments, and we do also have Nick and Michelle here if you should have any questions.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions related to the transfer of license? Hearing none.
Move approval.
There's a motion by Kamami,
Second.
second by Veen. Any other comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.2, application for Class 3 on and off sale beer and wine, alcoholic beverage license from JJPT Property, DBA House of Punjab. Ms. Thorsten.
Thank you. Thank you, President Sandy, members of the committee. As President Sandy had stated, before you is an application for Class 3, which is your beer and wine alcohol license from JJPT Property Incorporated, doing business as the House of Punjab, located at 3000 32nd Avenue South, Unit 102. We have received the application, which has been attached with your staff report. Issuance of new alcohol license does require City Council approval. This is, of course, as with the last item, subject to the final approval of departments and payment of fees. But we would recommend this be moved forward to City Council for approval.
Any comments or questions? Moved by Weber, second by Dockler. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.3, application for Class 4 food and beverage alcoholic beverage license from Bourbon Street LLC, doing business as La Cantina Tex-Mex Cuisine.
All right, thank you. One more item here for licenses, President Sandy, members of the committee. This item before you is the application for Class 4, which is your food and beverage alcohol beverage license from Urban Street LLC, doing business as La Cantina Tex-Mex Cuisine. This will be located at 1730 13th Avenue North, Suite number 2. We have received the application and payment of the application fee. This applicant is also the owner of 3 other restaurant bar businesses in North Dakota, and that is listed in your staff report. Issuance requires approval by City Council, and we would recommend moving this one forward as well to City Council for approval, once again subject to review and approval of city departments.
Thank you. Comments or a motion? Moved by Weber, second by Dockler. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck to all the new business owners. 2.4, special event request for noise variance and letter of intent for commingling for Sertoma 4th of July celebration, July 4th, 2021.
Yeah.
Good evening, Ms. Simeone.
Good evening, President Sandy and committee members. I have a a staff report here for a proposed operations of commingling at 2021 4th of July Sertoma. With this, you can see that there's a letter of intent from the Sertoma 4th of July president supporting this, as well as intent from the Eagles Crest. Jeff Wayne is the son of Paul, who is now taking the reins, and the map and how they plan to work through that area. We'd like to move forward for approval.
Any comments or questions? Moved by Dockler,
Move approval.
seconded by
Actually, I have
Weber.
a question.
Question by Dockler. Was that a motion or not a motion?
It was a question
It was
first.
a question, I'm sorry.
Um,
Well, we have a motion by Weber, second by Weigel.
I was seconding the motion, so
Got it.
I'll take the question first.
Okay,
You tried.
there is a motion by Weigel then. He moved approval. Is there a second?
Sure. I'll
Second by Weber. Okay, question, Ms. Dockler?
How many people have attended the event in the past? I know 2020 was obviously an anomaly.
You know, I'm going to invite Jeff up here. Jeff Wayne is here from Eagles Crest. I know last year was just fireworks, so they weren't able to have their full activity events. But anything you can offer?
I'd have to say it's usually, it varies throughout the day, whether it's early on with the kids parade and everything like that. I mean, so I'd say you're looking at probably 8,000 people throughout the day
Okay.
around there.
Is that what you're anticipating for this year's
We're hoping so. Yeah.
participation?
Yeah.
Okay. I did see that there's 2 security guards and 2 PD that are going to be hired to just make sure for this commingling request.
All commingling requests are required to have off-duty officers, as well as, since it's such a large community event, we also have on-duty.
And this may not be specific, I guess, to this 4th of July event, but is there a certain number of on-duty and off-duty that have to be required for an event?
There is. I believe it's Sergeant Dwayne Simon who works with our special events program, meets with them, and I believe you guys had a phone call already in, and they've already made an arrangement. And it's really per how many people. You know, we had a charity event that was a concert with commingling at University Park last year, not last year, the year before, and I believe they had 8. So it really depends on the need and the time.
Need is based on an approximate of the years past for attendance? How do they come up with the need?
I guess it really depends on, you know, the attendance, who's going to be there, what type of hours, you know, things like that. I don't work with that, that's Sergeant Simon, but they do really evaluate it to make sure that they can be proactive.
I was just thinking for 4 officers throughout the day, for 8,000 people coming through and commingling, that's a lot of folks to keep an eye on who's drinking and not drinking and underage use.
They did, with Officer Simon, he did say there'll be 2 to 4 on-duty police officers there all the time, 2 off-duty police officers plus the 2 security guards. He said that should be plenty for...
Total of 8.
Not to mention whatever else will be down and around there.
Okay, so 1 for approximately 1,000 people for the event, not all there at the same time, obviously. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Weber?
Sure. Perhaps Chief Nelson would be willing to speak to this quickly. My guess is this is a large event. Mostly downtown is where the crowd is. There's already officers on duty in that area.
Let me jump in if I could.
Please, great.
The event is going to be out on the south area, out by Apollo Park again.
Oh,
It is not downtown.
oh.
I believe we had it there before too, didn't we?
Yep,
Partially.
yeah. If I-
And Mr. Weber, in reference to this, for us, it'd be almost like, kind of like a housekeeping type of thing, because we've got such a long-standing relationship with Sertoma and the risk mitigation that they put in place, that we're very comfortable with our staffing level, we're very comfortable with the amount of volunteers that they have, as well as being, you almost have 3 layers. You got your volunteers, you got your private security, you got your police, so you have multiple sets of eyes watching what needs to be happening, and for as long as I can remember, I've worked here for 30-some years, we've dealt with the Sertomas on the 4th of July planning events, and regardless of the venue, they've been a top-notch organization in ensuring that we're doing the right thing, so I have no issues.
Very good. Why is it moving out south?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
It's actually been there for, this will be its 3rd year. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, my, okay.
Chief,
I've not been paying attention.
quick question, if Eagles Crest, the golf course is going to be managing the alcohol sales, the people selling the alcohol have to follow all the same rules that they would have to follow if they were actually indoors at the golf course or any other liquor establishment. They have to be trained, they have to see ID, they have to follow all of those rules, and they're subject, and Eagles Crest would be subject to all the same rules outside as they would be inside if somebody does something wrong,
And be
correct?
subject to all the same sanctions for any violations
Okay.
of those said rules, so.
So we don't want any problems.
Correct,
Nobody
and I'm
wants any
sure
problems.
Eagles Crest does not either,
I'm
so.
sure not, I'm sure not.
Right.
Ms. Dockler, another question?
Just to clarify too, this isn't the first time there's been alcohol at the event, it's just they want to move from a beer garden to having commingling,
They've
correct?
always had alcohol at the event.
But it was a beer garden prior.
Right, a large beer garden. And this is just, and they still have a parameter if you look at their map.
Right, where you can go and purchase the alcohol, but the commingling part is when they leave the purchasing area to go out into the general for the event, correct?
Correct, but most of the entertainment will be in that area. So I would assume they probably will be in that. Go ahead. you
Yeah,
can
it's
address
right,
it.
if you look at the map, it's right next to the,
It's right where everything's happening.
yeah, so the alcohol area would be right to the east of the stage with where all the food vendors are, and they'll be all using them as the barricades, if you will, with their trucks and everything else in that area.
So it's more that the kids then could get closer to the entertainment and the food trucks, the commingling piece? And placement of where the alcohol sales would be? Because if it's in a beer garden, it has to be totally separate.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Good questions. Any other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second. Thank you, Mr. Weber, on the floor. Is there, hearing no other comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Dockler dissents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 2.5, Obelisk Event Series Funding Request. Mr. Spencer Halverson, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Council President Sandy, members of the committee. So these next two items are linked together. Staff was approached last week by two event organizers that are seeking funding from the city. The DDA with the Obelisk Event Series with the funding request of $50,000 to help support their efforts to put their events on, as well as HB Sound and Light with the Greenway Takeover Festival requesting $100,000 to support that event as well. On the funding side, from September to December 2020, the city allocated $1.068 million in federal CARES money to Grand Forks Public Health to help fight the pandemic. About $500,000 of that original $1.068 million is being reimbursed back to the city as Grand Forks Public Health is expecting to receive some additional state resources, and they don't have as much of an urgent need at the moment with those funds. And so what staff is proposing to use $150,000 for these two requests of that $500,000 that's going to be reimbursed back to the city from Grand Forks Public Health. The mayor has stressed that he'd like to see staff put recommendations on their staff report, and so to start this conversation on a more positive note, staff is recommending approval with the recognition that this has been a hard-hit sector of the economy, and this $150,000 could be considered a one-time funding injection into the renewal of the experiential economy and help reinvigorate that as we come out of the pandemic. The big thing that staff wants to do here is help facilitate a conversation between the event organizers and you as the city council. They are here to advocate on behalf of themselves, and I would stress that these are two separate items for your consideration, and the first one is the DDA with the Obelisk Event Series. So Council President Sandy, when you're ready, I believe the Executive Director, Blue Weber, is here to give you some information on the event.
Mr. Weber?
President Sandy?
President Sandy and members of
Yes, Mr.
committee.
Weber.
If I could request to be recused from this item.
Can you state what the reason is for needing to be
I have a
recused?
family member involved, yes.
Okay.
I don't believe...
Do you stand to reap financial benefits from taking action on this item?
I do not directly, and I don't believe my family member would be receiving dollars, but it's close enough that I thought I should request recusal.
I'm okay either way. Is there a motion?
I'll move to recuse Councilmember Weber.
Moved by Kavami. Is there a
I'll second.
Second by Dockler. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Sure. All opposed? Mr. Weber is recused. Thank you. Mr. Weber, good evening.
Good evening. So here to talk about this idea for an obelisk event. One important note I think to make to start on this is something that we've heard from the EDC that is a really good kind of model to follow. Government seeds, private feeds. We've seen that also with the growth of the DDA. The DDA was founded by some seed funding from the city the first 3 years, then which we have been self-sustaining since. We actually have grown our staff and continue to expand our mission and do more and more. Bike share is another great example of some of the stuff that we've partnered with the city on and have seen great success over this past couple of years. With this obelisk event, we see huge success in most communities with these weekly programmed events. These are concerts, these are movies, things like that. So on the email that you guys have, I actually have some examples that I've put on there. Rapid City, Rochester, the Ogden Twilight series. One of the ones that I want to direct some attention to right away is the Ogden Twilight series. The primary sponsor of that event still currently is the city of Ogden. So it's a really nice partnership between the city and some activism of fun events that really drive traffic to their downtown area. I am not seeking any funding after this year. The plan is really just help seed fund this, so that way next year we can have the content created, that way we can go back to our sponsors and continue to expand this event and keep growing it and grow it past just the 6-week mark, the way that we're shooting for this year. We do want to break it down between 3 movies and 3 concerts. If you guys remember, last year we held an event programming series called Fork and Fun, and we did a drive-in movie in East Grand Forks. We had 2 movies that fully sold out in about under a week. And so we saw major success with these movies that we've been doing, and we want to continue that with the backdrop of the Red River over by the obelisk. We also want to make sure that we're doing concerts. We saw that, as already stated, special events were a very hard-hit industry over the pandemic, and so bringing back some of those concerts and different activities, so that way we can drive traffic to downtown businesses, and then those downtown businesses can really grab those customers and benefit from what we're doing. And so those are some of our plans. You will see an MOU. I think an important note to make here is, as far as good event planners, HB might be one of the best. As far as good connectors, the DDA does a pretty good job on that. And as far as good marketing, Ad Monkeys has a very rich history in town. And so this MOU is to just show the amount of responsibility that's going into each section of it and who will be fulfilling all of those different tasks. So I stand for any questions.
Any thoughts come to mind right away? Mr. Weber, I have a question.
Yeah.
What, and I guess I read the staff report and I recognize that time is probably of the essence. What if we pushed a month? Would that set you back? Would you still be able to move forward and get started?
We would not be able to get started. We'd be pushing it back, so we'd be actually shrinking those 6 weeks. The plan was August 21st, 20th for us. We have our street fair, which is a major giant event. Once again, another one that was seed funded by the CVB and has become self-sustaining on its own. And so the target dates for what we were doing, the June 30th to the August 4th, really was that window of summer to create some activity during the summer when we're kind of missing some of those big key events that show back up in the fall once students start to arrive.
Okay. Yep, Mr. Kavami?
Mr. Weber, so are you thinking that after this first year, your vendors, your downtown businesses, those are the folks that would kind of carry the torch?
Yeah, and we've had conversations with some people. It's not as proven of a concept, so it's one of the reasons why I talk about creating some of that content that really gets us the mobility to go back to sponsors and show them the successes that we've had.
And the total goal of your fundraising or support, let's say, this year and then going forward, what are you trying to achieve?
As far as amounts?
Yeah, amounts. Like, are you going to go seek private?
Yes, we don't plan on coming back for any public dollars for next year. The plan is to have it be completely self-sustaining based on private dollars. And so it's why the fund that we're asking is just strictly a seed funding to get it up off the ground.
Well, I can appreciate that. I think that it's important that if we have these dollars at this point to support an activity that would then sustain itself, for me, that's the most important thing, is knowing that the goal is not to come back for an annual ask and to actually get this and move it forward and help folks that potentially need it.
And I think that we have a proven track record of being able to be successful with that exact model. I mean, the DDA is probably the best example of that, and that we were funded by 3 years to start a staff, and we've grown that, so.
Thank you.
I think the YP was the same way, actually.
Pretty good organization, I believe.
I believe so. Yes, Ms. Dockler, comment?
For the budget that you sent over, thank you for sending that.
Of course.
Do you have in-kind dollars that are represented here, or are they not represented here?
We don't currently, and so like I said, this seed funding is really to get it up off the ground, and so we didn't want to put on that we have tons of food trucks or anything like that, because we want this to be an incentive back towards the businesses. As we know, the hardest hit industries were restaurants and then special event organizations, and so the intention is to not be asking for in-kind stuff as much as really just trying to inject some money back into that economy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll be very honest, I'm struggling. I'm struggling with the concept. Not that I don't like the concept. I think it's great, and I want to see it go forward. My struggle is twofold. A, we haven't had the discussion. All of a sudden, we have a $500,000 windfall, and we haven't had a discussion about what should that money be used for. Perhaps it should be used for special events, and that's okay, which leads me to my second problem is, if we're going to use the money for special events, we should let people know we're going to use it for special events and let other people come and ask for it. And so that's why I was asking about timing. I'm inclined to move approval or vote in the affirmative to move this forward, with the hope that local media picks up that we're actually potentially going to be funding special events. And if there are others in the community that are interested, that want to come forward in the next week, you know, it'd be nice to know. Yeah, I'm a little bit rambling here because I'm trying to, in my head, figure out the best way to do this. If we're actually going to be using money for special events, I think we should actually have a, yeah, Ms. Dockler, help me out, please.
And this isn't for you, Mr. Weber, so I apologize. Maybe it's for for Spencer here, but what kind of outreach have we done to let people know, if any, that we have this money, that we are thinking of using it towards special events, so that other organizations know? I can think of a lot of different groups here in town that would love the opportunity to grab some of this funding to help kind of reinvigorate the different organizations and the services that they're doing, particularly for fundraising efforts for nonprofits. I mean, isn't this the conversation that we've been having about nonprofits wanting gambling money? On top of that, I think about $500,000 coming back to us that's specifically COVID earmarked, and I think, what have we also been talking a lot about, which is mental health. And yes, we use some of that money to fund a position for MHM, the Mental Health Matters, but that's not a permanent funding of that position. And then on top of that, it hasn't necessarily impacted yet, because she's still new, she's still new, hasn't impacted yet the amount of services that are available to people that really need them, particularly low-income families, particularly families that have transportation issues, that may not have health insurance or access like that. I mean, President Sandy is right. There's a lot of things that we could use this money for that are very specific to a lot of the issues apart from just special events. And yes, that sector has definitely been hit. I will absolutely not say that it hasn't, especially with all of the construction that we've had on top of that downtown. Those poor businesses on 3rd Street, I can't imagine. So it's not to say that we shouldn't use some of this funding for that. It's just that it feels like this should be a much more public conversation, so that people know where this money is going towards, especially since it's just going to be gone. It's not going to be here again. People should be able to have a say in how that money impacts their community when so many folks are hurting, especially when this ask tonight, coupled with the other ask for $100,000, is our special events budget for the year, usually. I just think that we need to have further conversation. I love the idea. Don't get me wrong, I love the idea. It's just, this feels really, really fast and a lot of money.
Just something to add, Ms. Thurston?
President Sandy, Ms. Dockler, maybe if I could add just a little insight into the timing. I haven't been part of all the conversations, but I can tell you that it is very recent that the $500,000 has become available for reuse. I believe the timing of it was at the same time the mayor's office and city administrator's office was approached by these organizations. So they looked at, I do not believe any decision has been made to use the full $500,000 for special events, but the timing of this request came at the same time that funds became available, and they wanted to bring it forward to you for discussion. There will be more, as with when the budget, a greater plan of other uses of those dollars, and some of it does, involve the mental health piece of it when we combine CARES and ARPA. But so there will be more discussions. I believe the $500,000 it was more of a coincidence of the timing of when this request came at the same time that those funds became available.
And Ms. Dockler?
And Mrs. Sorsad, I don't mean to imply that the money was hidden or that there was anything untoward in the money coming available. It's just that having this conversation hasn't had the opportunity and the chance to be made public, and for it to be made public to other organizations to volunteer. It worked in the greatest favor for DDA and for the Greenway, because they were having those conversations already, and that's great. That's nothing against them. They're doing their work.
And they did not realize
Right.
these
And
dollars had,
so I'm
it
not
was just a
saying
request
that.
that came to the city, correct?
I'm not saying that or implying that. I'm implying that
Asking for the festival.
we just need to be able to have this conversation in a more public, deliberate manner, as opposed to just kind of piecemealing off significant chunks of this money without having a game plan for the rest of the $400,000 some dollars.
Mr. Sandy.
So, I have some thoughts, and any money received, I think, is best spent, in my opinion, on economic development and economic activity and generating activity and well-being for our citizens. If we're able to turn $1 into $3, then that's great. So I like that idea, but I do think that if we have $500,000, we might need to think about it a second before we spend it anywhere. And I would vote in favor of supporting the obelisk events, and I think that's a great use of it. But I think we just need to holistically understand what's the goal. So that's just a lot of money. So while I support the project, I wonder if this needs to just be tabled.
Mr. Sandy.
Yes, Mr. Veen?
Just a question for Mr. Weber. Do you have any idea what the economic impact would be for these events that are coming forth? I've been to the Greenway Takeover, which has been amazingly successful, at least what I thought. And of course, the obelisk is a new one, but specifically, I'm thinking the obelisk. You talked about weekly events, and they've been very successful. Any idea what the return on investment or the economic impact would be for this type of event?
Yeah, and it's kind of tough, especially for something, like you said, that's new. But I will say, when we did our drive-in movies in East Grand Forks, where it followed a very similar model, but it was in October, so it was not all that warm. We actually had delivery to the cars. And we had many of the restaurants who, just through 2 movies, these were people who were having to deliver to the cars. 4 restaurants all saw some of their best numbers that they had in over a month. This was in the heat of the pandemic, so it was very different time and everything. But we've seen significant returns from those ones, as well as I can speak just from my experience of the Ogden Twilight series. I have a family member who owns a coffee shop in downtown Ogden. She said that that's typically their best day of the week, even though it's on Thursdays compared to their Saturday rush, things like that. So these are small little snippets of what to see, but we've seen huge economic dollars on those. And I will say that I've spoke with quite a few of our members, and a lot of our members have said, look, these events drive the people downtown. It's my job to grab those customers and bring them into my business. And that's part of the reason why we don't want to have food trucks, is because we really want to drive this idea of go get your food at these different restaurants, grab some snacks, and then come and sit and watch the movie.
And so the primary beneficiaries would be the restaurants primarily downtown?
The downtown businesses.
It could be from any restaurant.
Any restaurant, yes, very much. Majority of our members are all downtown, so obviously it is a score back to our own membership. But even the restaurants that are downtown who aren't currently members stand to benefit from this.
Right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Veen. Any, yes, Mr. Kavami?
Just one last question, I guess. Is there a more traditional means for us to support the DDA in this event? So what would happen if this 5,000 was, or 500,000 was not available?
President Sandy, Mr. Kavami, members of the committee, what we would normally look at if council wanted to consider requests like this would be with our economic development dollars through the sales tax for quality of life issues.
Thank you.
Who, is it CVB currently manages our special events funding, correct?
Yes, that's correct, and we do allocate dollars for special events, and I believe those dollars have been applied for. This would be in addition to those.
Got it, okay. So, anyone want to do anything?
I'm not prepared to make a, oh, excuse me, Mr. Bean, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to make one question. I know several comments have been made about the broader issue. I think the specific issues are actually, I think, quite good events to be focusing on, but also there is the broader issue that goes beyond just these industries. You know, I think the mental health would be another great question and concern we would have and would be in need of funding. So even if we did these, we still have money remaining. Is there any type of process or procedures that we would consider for trying to understand the greater needs beyond this within our community and where we might be spending this money? It seems like we should be asking for more input or feedback from the public about where all the needs really might be that would be great ways to invest these funds. So I don't know if there's anything being planned beyond what we're hearing so far.
Thank you, Mr. Veen. I would assume that city staff would be taking comments, questions, putting together their recommendations for what we would do with the rest of the funds, correct, Ms. Storstad?
President Sandy, members of the committee, what we have done to date is we have worked with administration to talk about the needs that have come in, and looking at a combination was highlighted with you last week about with the ARPA funds and helping ratepayers through the wastewater utility. We're also looking at bringing forward recommendation for mental health matters, and I don't have the list in front of me, but we will be bringing something forward for discussion and getting that input. And to answer your question before, where else we would look to help with this, we did not recommend use of it for this, but there is city festival funds that is in our Fund 2163 that we had set aside. Hopefully that helps bring some clarification.
Mr. Kavami?
If we approve the use of the funds tonight, does it go, is that it? Does it go to council?
Council next week, yeah.
If you were to move this forward, it would be on city council agenda for next Monday for further discussion.
And Mr. Sandy, again, I know you started out with some question on this too. If we did move this forward, we could see what would happen within the next week of what other thoughts, ideas might come forward, and certainly make a final decision next week if we think this is a good investment, especially in comparison with other requests that may come. This would obviously get the word out there and see what thoughts may happen. It's quite quick within a week, but at least it would at least get the discussion going.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Veen. I think, for me, I can think of a lot of things that we could do with $500,000, including helping the DDA with the festival downtown, right? So I'm not 100% sure. I mean, Mr. Kavami hinted that maybe we should table. I, for one, think we should probably, in my opinion, give it preliminary approval so it can go on to council, give us a week to continue thinking about it, see what sort of feedback we get from the community, and then hopefully have another very positive conversation about it next week in one way or the other. Yes, Mr. Kavami.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think my one other thing I'd want to add is just from staff a plan, just maybe what you guys think if you had the $500,000 to spend, what's the maximum impact for the city, and I'd love to see this fit in there, but I'd like to see where, not just other organizations, but let's just zoom out a little. So I think I would motion approval based on just seeing a staff report for all $500,000.
So a motion by Kavami, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Weigel. I'm not, thank you, Mr. Weigel. I'm not 100% sure staff will be prepared. I don't know if we want to put them on the hot seat and say, you have to come up with something to spend an extra $400,000 on in the next week. So I'm not necessarily sure that that's a great idea either, but maybe they can come up with something. I know Ms. Dockler mentioned mental health. I think she would even recognize that having events for the people in all of our community to go to is part of that mental health process, giving people the opportunity to get out of the house and do something fun. And so I'm not saying that's not like adding a counselor. I recognize that, but it perhaps doesn't provide that laser focus for the individual, but it could provide benefit for the community as a whole. Yes, Ms. Dockler.
No, I agree. And that's why I think we need to be deliberate about how we spend these dollars. This is a gift. We are lucky to have this. We came out better than a lot of other places, and we have strong nonprofits in this town and other agencies and organizations that have helped people move forward as much as they can. We should be deliberate in how we spend it to set ourselves up for future growth economically, yes, but also future supports and growth for our people within the community, because we can have economic growth, but if we're not supporting those families that live here already, we're going to have problems too, because we won't have anybody to man those positions.
President Sandy, if I may?
Yes.
So I think instead of narrowing in on the $500,000, I think it's a part of a grander discussion with the CARES and ARPA funds that we are going to bring together more in a holistic view, because we're already touching on a lot of the things that you're speaking of tonight. I think the mayor saw this request come forward, saw it as a way to help those economic hurt industries, provide seed funding and set the path for something that could grow into something greater, as Mr. Weber has stated. So not to confuse things, but I think I don't want to get focused on just this $500,000 that got freed up, because we're looking at CARES and ARPA funding as a more holistic approach and bringing a grander plan forward. So.
Great, thank you. Yes, Mr. Kavami.
I think that would suffice my need for information, or make me feel whole as far as what our path is forward. So maybe it might make more sense to remove, so if I don't know if I can edit my, or rescind, or however you want to call it, but I would like to change my motion to just approve, knowing that we're going to get the full story. That's all I care about.
Perfect.
All right, I assume you're okay with that, Mr. Weigel?
I concur.
Very good. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. We'll see you next week, Mr. Weber.
See you next week.
Yes. Item 2.6, Greenway Takeover Festival funding requests. Mr. Alverson. First of all, Mr. Weber, would you like to be recused on this item?
No, thank you.
No, we're good to go, great. Okay, anyone else? Kamami? No? Okay. All right, yes, Mr. Alverson.
Council President, standing members of the committee, again, another request from HB Sound and Light for the Greenway Takeover Festival. This amount in $100,000 to support their efforts to put that event on. Tricia Lunsky and Jamie Lunsky are here from HB Sound and Light to advocate on their own behalf, and so if you want to welcome them to the podium, please, they can tell you about the event.
Certainly. Mr. and Ms. Lunsky, good evening.
Hello.
Good evening, Council.
So hopefully you guys have all heard of the Greenway Takeover Festival. It was our goal to make this a community festival. It was our way of giving back, of celebrating Grand Forks, of bringing live music back. Jamie's always felt that live music hasn't come back since the '97 flood. We wanted to show Grand Forks what's possible. The first year we heard a lot of, you can't do that. There's no water, there's no power. You can't do that down there. And you know, Jamie was set on, we're going to do this. And so it's always been our goal. The first year was free, so obviously we didn't make any money. Our goal has always been, if any money was ever made, it would just go back into bringing better talent the next year. It's very important for us to pay all the talent. So, you know, the one-man band that opens the festival, they get compensated. So that's been always important to us. This year we added a third stage. So we will have an educational stage. It'll have a different variety. But as you well know, this year has been pretty tough for events. So we are...
Well, we came to the city to try to fill a gap because a lot of our sponsors that we did have in 2019 had reduced their levels. And it's been kind of hard going knocking on doors and getting any responses for sponsorships with everything being so uncertain. So we didn't want to take the festival down from where it was at. So we came to the city and said, hey, can we try to fill a gap? And that's really why we're here today, to try to make sure we maintain the level of the festival for this year. And then next year, hopefully we'll have no issues and we'll be able to go forward as normal.
And we've always been the biggest sponsor. We always will be the biggest sponsor. But
we didn't have a great year last year either, so.
Any comments or questions?
I'll move approval.
Mr. Weber. You've been quiet over there. That's Mr. Weber moves approval. Is there a second?
I will second.
Second by Veen. Additional comments? Stockler? Yes, ma'am?
So thank you for sending the budget. I don't know if all the other council members had an opportunity to look at it before council tonight, since it was added on after the fact. But I'm just wondering, it does look like the city is the only sponsor on the budget that I'm looking at. It's $100,000 is the ask.
That's where we're at right now with sponsorships that we think we can obtain.
Yes, that was, Mr. Kavami and I visited about that.
Okay.
The difference is the 100, so you've got a 315 in expenses and 215 in revenue. The city would be on top of that to fill that gap. That was not clear on the budget that you provided. I read it the same way Ms. Dockler did.
Apologize for that.
Yeah. So how many sponsors are there in that, the 100,000 in sponsorships you've already got?
We have 15 to 20 confirmed right now.
Great.
Some are small, some are decent, but it kind of varies all over. So.
And you're going to continue to try to get additional sponsors?
And we are, yes.
Yep.
But we hope to, get some more. We don't know where we're at, but we know we're an offset right now.
I can imagine it would be difficult to get additional sponsors if the city has already said that they're going to pick up the
The 100 is what we hope to get.
You're still working on the 100. Got it.
What we
Okay.
hope to get.
Yes,
Okay, so
I understand.
Let me rephrase that. That's
Sure.
not what we have.
Okay.
That's what we hope to achieve.
Okay, that makes more sense. All right.
Quick, give us the budget. It wasn't as
great.
Clear as it probably should have been. So, sorry about that.
No. Well, any other comments?
Mr. Sandy?
Yes, Mr. Weigel?
I think this goes kind of like the last one. I think probably a conversation to be had, and I would agree that we move this one forward as well and then have that conversation over the next week.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, Ms. Dockler?
Would this event happen without the city approving the 100,000? What if it was a lesser amount, or,
It
I mean,
would
would it still
happen, it
happen?
just would probably be, we'll have to start cutting something, or we just don't know.
So it would be,
Everything's uncertain.
right, so it would hypothetically be 2 stages instead of 3 stages. You just wouldn't move up to the 3rd stage.
Or
Well-
instead of a full band, we have, smaller acts, or we don't know right now.
So are the acts secured, like the Cuckoo Kangaroo, for example?
The
The one that my kids
headliners-
are excited about.
Headliners are secured.
And Cuckoo Kangaroo is considered a headliner.
I just had to ask. I would be remiss.
So we'll be in the front row.
Yes, Mr. Kavami?
I too am excited for Cuckoo Kangaroo. So for me, this is just a little different, being that you guys are a private entity rather than DDA. My first question is, so your income is $215,000. The next dollar, what happens to that dollar? Where does it go?
Just like we stated before, if we do make any money on this event, we will roll that into making the talent bigger for the next year
Sure.
going forward.
So
Next year we can bring Lady Gaga back.
Sure. Bring Everclear back. That was really quite a show.
We even go higher than Everclear. That's what we're hoping for.
So as I look at it, so it's a private show put on with city dollars. As a good chunk, a third of it, right, would be city dollars.
For 1 year.
For 1 year, correct, yeah. So in my mind, I feel like if it breaks even, then we did our job. If it makes a penny, then that money, in my opinion, needs to go back to the city.
Okay.
And this is just something I want to put forward for us to think about. But if we're going to support it, and then you guys do a great job, which I'm sure you will, and maybe it makes more money, then maybe then the gap truly is a gap, and we're just filling in where we can't make where you guys aren't made whole. Because I can recognize that there is a donation component that would normally be done by HB. So that's something I would just like to propose we think about. I don't know how we execute that, but in my mind, if you hit 400,000, then we pay back, you pay the city back, and then you keep the money and reinvest it however you want to. That's my big distinction, is just the private entity versus the nonprofit.
And our goal is to not lose a lot of money on this.
Sure, and I can get that that's the point, right? So I don't know what the best process is, if we can approve, well, we already have a motion, but can that be altered based on the motion that Brett has already made?
We can, but there's already a motion and a second, and we should act on the motion and the second, and you can always make that suggestion next week, for example, if this passes.
Exactly, that's what I mean, for next week, yep. Okay.
Yes, Ms. Dockler?
Is this event also receiving the CVB funding as well for special events?
Yes, we received 12,000.
So that's in that 12,000, then we'd be kicking in an extra $100,000 from the city.
Is Mr. Weber?
Mr. Sandy, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
You've given so much to the city, both in terms of your finances and just the joy you've given the city with the previous events, some of the best that I've experienced in the city. When this whole pandemic hit, there were many businesses I was worried about in town. Yours was one in particular, an important Grand Forks business. And so it's great that you're here tonight. I'm very glad to see you. And these are federal dollars that were intended for COVID impacts. Of course, it was directed at the health department, but now these are federal dollars. These are not our locally raised dollars. And the idea that we would support you unless you make money, then if you make any money, we're going to keep it would be disturbing to me. But mainly I just wanted to say congratulations. And I don't know how you hung on over this last year, but congratulations in doing so.
It was a long year that went by very fast. I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah.
But we're hoping that, the event that we're doing downtown, we're trying to bring people in from out of town, and we're trying to make this grow, and we hope to stimulate more revenue in the city by doing this event.
make this grow. So 5 years from now, we talk about, oh, we gave them that bit of federal dollars that didn't cost us anything, and look at what this has turned into. That's what I'm hoping the story we get to tell.
Story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think there certainly is opportunity cost for that $100,000, but I understand what you're saying, Mr. Weber. There's a motion and a second. Oh, by the way, we should thank Public Health for doing all their hard work related to COVID and also being efficient with the funds that they got from the city through the government, and appreciate them operating so well this year. So, motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Dockler dissents. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
We can do this all over again. Item 2.7, appointments and reappointments to committees and commissions. Reappointment to Downtown Design Review Board, Leah Brzezowski, and appointment to the Events Center Commission, Russell Kraft. Any comments or concerns about the two appointments? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Moved by
I'll second it.
Weigel, second by Veen for both appointments. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Mr. Sandy, can I make a comment?
Of course, Mr. Veen, please do.
Okay, I was just going to say, I was included as a part of the process for selecting the Event Center Commission individual. I, along with the chair of our board, met with Russell and the mayor. The mayor, of course, set that up. I thought the process worked well, and we sat and had a great conversation about the merits, and I just wanted to let everybody know that it was very inclusive and appreciated it much.
Thank you, Mr. Veen. That's very good to hear. Glad to hear the process worked the way I suppose we all would want it to work. So, again, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously, and thanks for the two people that are, I don't know if this is their, one's a reappointment, and Mr. Kraft is a new appointment. Thanks to both of them for their service for the city of Grand Forks. Item 2.8, Assessment District for project number 8365, District 352, North 62nd Street Water Main from Gateway Drive to 10th Avenue North. Mr. Lieberman, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, President Sandy and committee members. This project proposes to install a 16-inch potable water main along 62nd Street. This is an area just south of Gateway Drive, about 1 block west of the North Walmart, if you're familiar with that area. This request began with a site plan and a request for annexation by one of the property owners adjacent to 62nd Street. The city currently has a sanitary sewer and sanitary lift station installed along 62nd Street, so this would be a next step in developing that area, which is currently just outside of city limits. I will point out that if you turn to the staff report on the proposed district, all of the properties are reflected as future assessments. Next week at City Council, you will be seeing a request for annexation for one of those properties, the one that initiated this request, which is Lot 4 on the diagram. The estimated cost for this project is $311,000. There is a city cost share for upsizing of the water main. City policy is that we would special assess the equivalent of an 8-inch main, and anything above and beyond that would be a city cost share. In this case, it's estimated to be approximately $100,000, which would be paid from Fund 5300, the water fund. So with that, engineering is requesting approval of the engineer's report, creation of a special assessment district, and directing engineering to prepare plans and specifications and advertise for bids for this project. Pending your questions.
Mr. Lieberman, why are we upsizing that to a 16-inch pipe?
We currently upsize on the quarter section and the section lines. That area is a major thoroughfare, and we anticipate as the city grows, it will need larger transmission pipes.
Standard operating procedure for where it's located to the service. Thank you.
Yes.
Any comments or other comments or questions?
Move approval.
Moved by Kavami, second by Dockler. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.9, plans and specs, project 8343, 44, and 45, sanitary sewer, water main, storm sewer for Kingsview A3 subdivision. Mr. Lieberman.
Thank you. This next project was actually a development request brought to the city by KHL Investments to develop the area between 59th Avenue and 62nd Avenue South. This essentially would extend South 14th Street down to 62nd Avenue. This project request would install a sanitary sewer, water main, and storm sewer in this development, the Kingsview 8th subdivision. It is proposed as a privately funded development by KHL Investments with a follow-on project in 2022 to install paving and streetlights, which is requested to be special assessed. Engineering will bring that request forward at a later time as a separate project. The request tonight is simply for approval of plans and specifications for installation of sanitary sewer, water main, and storm sewer. The city has entered a three-way agreement with KHL Investments and Pribula Engineering, and our staff has been working closely with Pribula Engineering, and we do recommend approval of their plans and specifications at this time.
Any questions? Move approval. Moved by Kavami.
Second.
Second by Veen. Thank you, Mr. Veen. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 210, thank you, Mr. Lieberman. Have a good evening. 210, plans and specs for project 8096, District 569, swale improvement adjacent to Breezy Cove. Mr. Danielson, good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy, members of the committee. So the project that I've got before you here is swale improvements adjacent to Breezy Hills Cove, and that's in the Sunbeam Edition off of Belmont. And this project is going to consist of grading the swales in the backyards and cleaning them up. The project was initiated to resolve resident-reported drainage issues. And initially, the property owners were given the chance to correct the drainage issues themselves. And then if the drainage issues were not corrected by a certain time limit, we said that we would come in with a special assessment project after that time. And that time has now come. Most of the property owners back there did do a lot of the work that they needed to get done, but there was a string of them that did not. So this project is set to correct those drainage issues and will primarily consist of just removal of some vegetation and built-up sediment along the swale. The construction cost is estimated to be about $39,500 with a special assessment cost of about $49,000, and the benefiting properties would be special assessed. It would be classified as a storm sewer project, so it would not be protestable. It's scheduled to be bid on June 24th, 2021, and construction is projected to take place during the 2021 construction season. So staff is recommending the approval of plans and specifications for this project.
Very good. Any comments or questions? Mr. Kavami, it's your ward.
Have we received any communication from anybody that would be affected within this district?
At this point, no one has reached out to us, but we've been in close communication with the property owners in this area for about 2 years now, for the whole duration of us trying to work with them to do it before we got involved. So we've been in pretty close contact with a lot of them, and for some of them, I can't speak for all of them, but some of them would prefer the city just come in and do it rather than themselves taking care of it. So
perfect. I appreciate all the work that you guys have put into this. Motion approval.
Move approval by Kavami. Is there a second? Mr. Weber, thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 211, decision document, project 8228, reconstruction of 4th Street from Demers to First Avenue North. Mr. Danielson, again, thank you.
thank you, President Sandy, members of the committee. So this next one is North 4th Street reconstruction from Demers Avenue to Demers Avenue to First Avenue North. This section of street has been proposed to be reconstructed using about $1.6 million of federal funding, and that funding would be at an 80-20 split federal-local until we hit that cap, at which point the city would be responsible for 100% of the costs. At this point, 2 different design concepts are being considered for the project, and we would like to move forward with just one concept to eliminate the time that the consultant has to spend on developing multiple different options as we move forward. And the design engineering is being funded 100% locally, so any amount of time that we can save on that end saves the city dollars. So we're looking to narrow it down to just one design concept at this point. So right now, we've got 2 alternatives that we're looking at. The first one is reconstructing the street with parallel parking on both sides of the road. This is very similar to how it exists right now. The primary difference is going to be that there's bump outs on the intersection at First Avenue North, and then they would continue those bump outs around the Demers Avenue intersection. And then we would have the decorative elements that are present on the Demers project that just finished last year and are now being done on 3rd Street. And those decorative elements would be consistent for both alternatives, just before we get into the next one. So I'll go through these in just a little bit more detail, but the second one is going to be an option that includes separated bike lanes. And the separated bike lanes are bike lanes along the side of the street that are physically separated by a raised median or very small piece of curb. So going over a couple of the advantages and disadvantages of these 2 options. For the base design, which we're considering what is currently out there right now, or the one that will be very similar to that, some of the advantages are that it maintains the maximum amount of parking on the street. There is little to no storm work required for the project because we would be keeping the curb lines where they are at. So that helps save some cost. Right along with that, this is likely going to be the least expensive option. And this one can accommodate the curb bump outs that you see on Demers Avenue and that we are currently installing on 3rd Street. The separated bike lanes would not facilitate those curb bump outs. The disadvantage, or the real big disadvantage between these 2 options on this one's behalf, is that it does not have a improved bicycle facility. So if we move over to the separated bike lane option, the advantages, or the big advantage on this one, is that we do get that protected bike lane, that improved bike facility, but it does come with some disadvantages. The first big one being that there is a lot less parking when you go with this option. The separated bike lanes only would go for 1 block. This project has only been programmed for a single block, so we would be constructing the bike lanes for just 1 single block, and then it would go back to how it is. The curb bump outs do not work with this option. If we were to do this option, the Demers Avenue intersection would have to be reconstructed because that one currently has bump outs on it, but we cannot make the bump outs work with the separated bike lanes. So we would have to reconstruct the entire Demers Avenue intersection, and this intersection would be ineligible for federal funding because we just did that with the Demers Avenue project that was federally funded. This option also has some complicated grading that's involved with it, so the storm sewer would be very intricate and difficult, which would raise the costs. We would also have to remove the left turn lane on 4th Street. And all of that kind of culminates into a very high increase in cost of about $1 million. And that would be 100% city cost. And those, again, are associated with reconstructing that intersection, which would be ineligible, redoing all the storm work, and then just the medians themselves, getting those bike lanes separated like that does involve some costs. So we did have a public input meeting for this project last Thursday on June 10th. We had 2 attendees, and then myself and 2 people from CPS, our consulting engineer. The public is allowed to send in some comments for the next 15 days, starting on June 10th last Thursday. From the meeting, there wasn't a whole lot of overwhelming support one way or the other, but we're anticipating that as we get more input, or as people give us what they want for input, that the strong urge is going to be towards the option alternative A with parallel parking on both sides, simply because that maintains a lot of the parking. And what we found on 3rd Street and what we're kind of hearing just in our discussions is that parking is a top priority for a lot of these businesses and a lot of the people downtown. So we anticipate that more support will go for alternative A, but if anything changes in the input that we get, we would update the staff report accordingly. Knowing all that, staff's recommendation at this time is to select alternative A, which is reconstruct North 4th Street with parallel parking on both sides, as the option to go through to the documented CADX.
Thank you. Very good information. Any comments or thoughts?
Well, we've got a comment. I mean, we've got 500,000 sitting there. We could subsidize, half of this increase, but I don't think that's a good idea. I'm just simply putting that there's $500,000 that could be poorly spent. Maybe to go back to another topic, but I think that it's pretty clear that I'd like bike lanes everywhere, but for 1 block, it doesn't seem to be worth $1 million. So in my opinion, I think it makes sense to have everything match. That would be my vote.
Mr. Sandy?
Yes, Mr. Veen?
Yeah, I would have to concur. I think there's, I mean, as we ran down all the pros and cons, that the pros for alternate A seems to be pretty great with the parking and maintaining the parking, and there's a lot of parking on that side street. $1 million cost is huge. Digging up the intersection of Demers is another issue. We've committed to the bump outs on all the other locations except for along Demers already, and it's only a one-block section with dead ends really at both ends for the bike path. So I would have to, without question, recommend we stay with alternate A for those and probably other reasons with underground utilities and the like. So actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to make a motion that we stay with alternate A.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Danielson, can you go back to the previous slide? I have one quick question for you. You notice that the left turn lanes, the stops for them, like this one, are set significantly back from the intersection, from...
Correct.
In order to allow our, I believe, if I recall correctly, allow our first responders specifically with the fire trucks, the ability to go through, make those left turns. Do you, here's a question for you, and perhaps you can talk to other people and see if you can come up with some info for us.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how many people actually stop in the right spot at those intersections, because I seldom see people, I always see people in the left turn lane stopped at the light rather than set back. And so I'm almost, this isn't, I think we designed it wrong. I think it's perhaps we need more education for people to stop where the big solid white line is. I don't know, Mr. Weber, what do you see? Because you spend more time downtown than I do, so.
I drive through the intersection at 5th and Demers pretty much daily, at least once. I always see people stop at the
Well, that's great, then it could be an exercise in futility, but I would be interested to know if we're seeing people, maybe you can just look some more, actually take an active look and come back and let us know. I'd be interested. Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Appreciate it. Moving right along. Item 212, environmental document for project 7978, reconstruct South Washington Street from 5th Avenue South to 1st Avenue North. Mr. Krenko, good evening.
Good evening, Council President Sandy and members of the committee. The item before you is the documented categorical exclusion, or the environmental document for the Washington Street underpass. This is kind of the next step from kind of the previous item where you narrowed down the decision document, and then you have the documented CADX before you. This project is the Washington Street underpass from the decision document that the City Council reduced the items back in December. We are looking at reconstruction of the roadway to a 4-lane section, similar to how it is now, a rehabilitation of the railroad bridge, as well as a rehabilitation of the retaining walls. This project is proposed to cost approximately $11 million, with the city share being about $1.1 million. The other piece to this categorical exclusion is there was one minor piece that needed to be kind of looked at a little bit closer, and that was the intersection, I believe, at 1st Avenue North, which is the first intersection as you are going northbound, and whether to leave that as a full access intersection or to make it into a 3/4 intersection. That's a 3/4 intersection is kind of similar to what you'll see right over by Walmart on Columbia, where if you are on Columbia, you can go straight, you can go right, you can go left, but if you are on the side street, you can only turn right. You cannot go through, you cannot turn left. During the environmental document process, the engineer ended up discovering through the traffic operations that if that intersection was left as a full intersection, the side streets would end up having a level of service F in future years at the AM and PM peaks. By restricting that to a 3/4 intersection and having that traffic move north to that signalized intersection for those left turns and through movements, it improved the traffic operations at that intersection. And with that, staff is recommending approving the documented CADX and concurring with the project concepts as proposed, and select alternative B, which is the build alternative, with option 2, which is for the 3/4 intersection at First Avenue North.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Weber?
Move approval.
Moves approval. Second by Kavami. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 213, preliminary engineering agreement for project 8164, 47th Avenue South interchange. Mr. Krejko again.
Thank you, President Sandy and members of the committee. The preliminary engineering reimbursement agreement with the North Dakota Department of Transportation. This is the standard agreement that we end up receiving, and what this agreement entails is that if the city decides to cancel the project or wishes to materially change the project to reduce the scope, that the city would end up reimbursing the DOT on any expenses that they had. Fairly standard agreement, kind of, if we end up backing out, they get their costs covered. Overall, we've been going forward with this. We have approximately 1.5 million budgeted for this. Right now, after going through the selection process and preliminary estimates, we're looking at a total cost of this preliminary engineering of about 1.3 million, and so the city's share would only be about 650,000. This is still the preliminary stages, so that could go up a little bit. It might stay about the same. I don't really anticipate it's going to go down a whole lot, and you have a tendency on these things, if you run into issues, the costs tend to go up a bit, or stay the same. In general, this is for the engineering agreement to look at the environmental document for the I-29 and 47th Avenue interchange, and staff is recommending approval.
Any comments or questions? Hearing none, is there a motion by Kavami?
I would like to very excitedly motion approval.
Approval. Kavami, second.
Second.
Second by Veen. Thank you, Mr. Veen. Any other comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Krenko. Item 214, water and wastewater ordinance update. Ms. Potman, good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy and members of the committee. What you have before you this evening are some proposed changes to Chapter 25, the Waterworks chapter in City Code. Some of the changes that we are proposing, the ones that you'll see littered throughout the chapter are related to titles of people, positions that they've held, and those tend to change over the years, so we've cleaned that up quite a bit, using only the city administrator or a city representative. The duties are still being fulfilled, but the titles tend to change, so to keep it clean, we decided in working with the city attorney's office, it might be easier just to go with the city representative role. More to the meat of it, the part that changes within the water code is related to water meters, and it just kind of clarifies the ownership and responsibilities of the water meters. The city installs the water meters. The resident owns the water meters, but we still need to maintain control of that water meter because it actually is obviously metering the water, and that's how we charge our residents, and it's also a way that we make sure it's not tampered with and that sort of thing. So we need to clarify that a little bit in code, and it matches with what other cities do. So it was just kind of vague, so we wanted to clarify that. The meat of the changes are related to our wastewater code and mostly our industrial pretreatment program. Over the last couple years, we have yearly audits with the state, and we have wanted to bring our code into compliance with state and federal regulations. So there's a few items that needed to be updating in order to make us in compliance. So most of those changes you'll see, I kind of highlighted them in the staff report. We added some additional definitions to the code. We updated some specific prohibitions that feds from state wanted us to add into our code. We also revised the mass loading capacity that we allocate to industry, and that was just a cleanup of what we've been doing through our facility planning and taking account for another parameter, the TKN parameter, instead of just biochemical oxygen demand and total suspended solids. So we made that clarification. We also updated some portions of the pretreatment code and what we include in our pretreatment permits. And we've been including that in our permits, but we wanted to make sure it was also clarified in code. And we also added additional language about we have to publish significant non-compliance users. So we have to have all of that in code according to federal and state requirements. And lastly, we clarified some of the language related to our surcharges. The formulas were in there, but a lot of the parameters and the variables in the formula weren't defined. So we just wanted to make sure that that was clear and defined in the code. It's quite a process over the last few years, so I'd like to thank the City Attorney's Office for working with staff and going through that. There was a lot of going back and forth between state, federal, and city code, so it was quite an effort, so I just appreciate their assistance with that as well.
Thank you, Ms. Botman. Mr. Gosted, did you have a comment?
I don't want to take any credit for the effort with the city attorney's offices. I want to hand it to my partner, Joe Quinn, who did carry the laboring oar in moving this forward along with Ms. Botman. So I don't want to take any credit. It was Joe's work, Mr. Quinn's work in moving this forward.
Good job, Mr. Quinn. Thank you for all your hard work. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Weber moves approval. Is there a second by Dockler? Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Last but not least, item 215, Ambassador Hotel update. Good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy, members of the committee. Just want to come forth, update you where we are with the Ambassador. As you all know, that back in early March, middle part of March, approximately March 11th, a complaint came through via PD to the inspections office. We sent, like we do with any complaint, we sent inspectors, one inspector out there, as well as a fire marshal, as well as a member of the health department. They identified deficiencies not only related to that complaint, but a gamut of deficiencies. Talked with the trustee, set up a time to actually do a full building inspection with members from the building inspections department, the health department, and the fire department. Once they compiled all their data, they met with their individual leaders, fire chief, Mr. Bedard in the health department, and myself, and we all got together, and the compilation of all of the violations, we ended up deeming the building dangerous. So we've been taking the process following Chapter 19, which is the building code, Article 11, which is the dangerous building part of the building code. And right now where we are at Chapter 19, Article 708, where the city engineer deems the building dangerous or the ability to demolish. So as of last week, on the 7th, the trustee was served with a demolish order. What happens when the trustee got the demolish order, he has 7 days to appeal that order. And it's written in code that appeal will come back to city council. He did appeal that order last Friday within the 7 days. So the next step is to come forth in front of council with his appeal, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Gosted and his team if they want to go in a little bit more into depth at where we are now or where the process goes from here.
Thank you, Mr. Gosted.
This is another one that I'm going to defer to somebody within my office who took the laboring oar and did quite a bit of work on this. It's my associate Ella Broughton. I'll let her explain. Again, she did all the laboring oar on this. So.
Ms. Broughton, thank you. Good evening.
So just like Mr. Baseluk said, the demolition order was served last week, the 7th. It was appealed, and so at this point, it does go before the city council. The city council does have the ability to designate a committee to hear the matter. However, it's important that this hearing happens basically as soon as possible, whether it's before the council or the designated committee.
Does the city attorney's office have a recommendation?
We would be representing the inspections department and presenting the evidence in front of the city council. Mr. McGregor would be able to present his evidence, and the city council would make its determination. Obviously, I think the recommendation is going to be with respect to what we did in with the inspection department. Bear in mind, we also have, and this is what Ms. Broughton carried the day on, is there's a restraining order that exists today that precludes people from being within the facility. That's what the restraining order did, so that we removed people from being in that dangerous building. Now the issue is, does this building need to be demolished? And so, I guess since we advocated for people to be removed because it's a dangerous building, I suspect we'll probably be advocating that it be demolished as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, let me clarify my question. Do you recommend we put together a committee, or should it simply come directly to the city council?
No, I think it could become, my recommendation is to come from this entire city council, because otherwise you potentially could have a committee then submitting it to the full city council and voting on it again. I think we just have the hearing and not have a committee.
And is your recommendation that happen at next week's city council meeting?
The way, if my understanding is, it's supposed to be as soon as practicable.
Any other questions, Mr. Weber?
Do we know anything about, what can you tell us about the appeal? On what grounds was it appealed, other than that he has the right to appeal it?
Ms. Broughton and I just received it this afternoon. I haven't had to take a look at it. I think it was, I don't know what the...
That'll be presented next Monday,
It'll be presented,
presumably.
and I would expect you'll see a lot of the same evidence that you saw that was presented to the judge in the restraining order. You'll see that too.
Do you need a motion to have this brought forward to council next week, or does it automatically happen?
Unless you wanted to defer and create a committee, I think by operation of the ordinance, it comes directly before. I think the only thing you'd have to do is to set the date, so that we could send out a notice to the landowner.
Mr. Weber?
I'll move to set the date for next Monday.
For a week from tonight. Is there a second? Second by Dockler. Any other comments, Ms. Dockler?
This doesn't have to do with what we're currently motioning to vote on, but what happened to all those people? Did we help them? Did they all land hopefully on their feet, or are we still hoping to search for housing since they literally cannot go back into what was their house?
So President Sandy, members of the committee, Ms. Dockler, what we did originally, there's several different social service agencies that provide help. When we went through this process, it was easier just to find one. Ms. Sherrick from the mission stepped forward, not to represent the mission, but to represent basically collectively as a whole, all those agencies. In talking with her after the process, they were given, we wanted them out immediately. We told them that the building was dangerous. They had time to get out. Those that did leave did take advantage of that. There are some that did not take advantage of that. I have not followed up personally to see where each and every one of those that were in that building at the time, where they are, but I also have not received any phone calls. Early on in the process, I did receive phone calls from whether it was somebody representing, it may have been a social worker, hey, can they go get their stuff? And then they would just update me, yes, they're going to be over here at a hotel. But I don't have any more information than that. But we did our best working, not only at least having conversations with the Housing Authority. Has anybody reached out? I had some other folks reach out. I believe it's called Homeless Helpers, Mr. Weber. All those agencies were involved to some extent if it was asked of them. But it was not that each individual tenant was, here, we're going to sit you down, let's come up with a plan. We left it to the individual's choice.
I guess my biggest concern was that I imagine, and I would assume, and I could be wrong because it's an assumption, but I would assume we're also talking about families and they cannot go to the mission. Children can't be there under the age of 18, and then families, even spouses, legal spouses, can't stay in the same place at the mission either. And so to deal with those situations in our community is a well-known hole for services because we just simply don't have enough shelter for those kinds of situations. And so that's where one of my biggest concerns lies, because yes, it was a horrible place for people to be living in, and they probably shouldn't have been living there. However, that is where they were living, that was their home, and then all of a sudden they just couldn't live there anymore. And we're talking about an extremely vulnerable population that doesn't necessarily have the ability or the skills to advocate for themselves, to reach out to places. And so I would hope, and hopefully this never happens again, but I would hope that if something like this happened again in the future, that the city, we would take a much more proactive, hands-on method of helping those people find some place to land. Not necessarily permanent by any means, but at least some place to land, because the stress of already being in that kind of a situation of poverty, and then to have your home completely removed from you, and then not have the ability to live in a place like the Mission, or if the family shelter is full, or the Kristen Care and Share is full, and you're not a victim of domestic violence, you can't be at the Safe House for CVIC. I mean, there's just nowhere for those families to go. And since it's really our problem, I feel like it should be our responsibility to try and help fix it. So again, going back to that CARES dollars conversation, COVID really exposed a lot of the holes in which we have in our community to serve and support the most vulnerable.
Mr. Weber?
In addition to the agencies that were mentioned, I believe that Spectra was also involved. It's my understanding that all of the agencies we have in town who attempt to serve this population worked in a collaborative manner, but individuals are not under any legal obligation to accept help. And there's no way for the city to, force them to accept that help.
I don't think that was my intent, but more that our city, we really should take responsibility for a place that we were inspecting and allowing to operate legally was that bad. And then we had to evict people. And then, yes, people have the option to engage in a kind of service. We have a lot of services available to people, but there's a lot of restrictions as well. Even for housing, through the Housing Authority, if you've been evicted, you're not going to get a voucher. And so there's a lot of conversations about that population that was living in the motel for a lot of reasons.
I don't think anybody wanted to close down the Ambassador, and I think it's a very unfortunate situation, but sure, there's probably some culpability on the side of the city and inspections, but on the other hand, we know that if we put them out of business, we are displacing people, and so there's a very fine line there of keeping that housing open that you are saying that we so desperately need, and then on the other hand, making sure the people that are there are safe. So, yes, Ms. Dockler.
I don't think that we should keep open housing that's not safe, but I want to be clear on that. I don't think we should expect people because they are under the poverty line or just experiencing some kind of homelessness to expect that they only get to live in terrible places that are unsafe. I don't want that to be what people carry away as my intent in this conversation, but rather I feel like we need to have this hard conversation and look at those COVID dollars that we have and address some of these issues that are ongoing and consistent within our community, that a lot of times we want to throw up our hands and say we can't do anything about it, when we at least have to take a good crack at it, and $500,000 is a good crack at starting to have a conversation and addressing some of these issues. So that's where I'd like to see that conversation go moving forward.
Mr. Weber? First, thanks for getting involved in this early on, President Sandy. Nobody's suggesting that the city didn't want to do or wasn't doing anything. Homeless Helpers has no restrictions. I wasn't involved in every single family, but my understanding is every effort was made, including exceptions to rules, and some families were not interested in receiving that assistance. Yeah.
I think we can all agree that it's a very unfortunate situation, and for many reasons. Any other?
Mr. Sandy, I have a quick question.
Yes, Mr. Weigel.
Ms. Broughton, or maybe Mr. Gosted said it, and it cut out, so maybe I didn't hear it correctly, but is it true that the restraining order for the property expired today? Is that what I heard?
No, the restraining order is still in effect.
Okay, perfect. Like I said, it cut out, so I wasn't sure if I heard you wrong. I just wanted to clarify.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Weigel. Any other comments? There is a motion and a second to set the hearing for next week. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Boslug, is there a motion to adjourn by Weber, second by Dockler? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Good night, everyone. Thank you. Good meeting.